Well, here we are, the morning, I guess not really the morning after. We are literally in the mere hours of the aftermath of our SportsCenter Anchors bracket. And we'll get to the results in a second. Shout out and credit to SVP. But JB, like, have we ever had more Twitter interaction than with this?
It was cool, right? I think that speaks to the fact that a lot of people right now are dealing with real world issues.
Sure.
They're looking for a distraction away from those issues. And this was a good distraction. You know, it was something we put together over the last 2 to 3 weeks that's been a daily source of entertainment for people. You could debate this stuff all day. There are probably 20 names that didn't make the bracket that you can make a case for. There are, why did this guy win versus this? I mean, there's all of that. But at the end of the day, why did we put it together? To give people an outlet. And I look at it this way, 3 ways. One, we wanted to provide some fun during a darker time. We wanted to provide a necessary distraction. And then on top of it, let's face it, this is content for shows too. I mean, if you're a sports talk show, it's great when Tom Brady signs with the Bucs. You're going to get a few days of content out of that. But you can't guarantee that for 3 weeks. SportsCenter is a relatable piece of content. People know these guys, and if you could talk about it and have some fun with it, if it kills a segment or two and makes it entertaining for your audience, that's why you do it.
I think we saw this in some of the matchups, and this sort of goes to your point about SportsCenter means something to people. Like, you can really see the different generations at play here, right? Like, to you, it's probably like, of course you knew DP was going to end up in the final. To me, it's insane Stuart Scott didn't win this thing. And that's to take nothing away from Scott Van Pelt, but I do think it is a credit to him that A, he's still on air, and B, he's really good on social media.
Well, and I think part of that, he's not just on air, he's really great at what he does. I mean,
you don't get your own SportsCenter if you're not one of the best to ever do it.
I mean, to me, you could debate, is Scott Final 4, Final 8, but there's no question. He's one of the best to do it. Stewart, DP, KO, I'm 46. I grew up, the heart of SportsCenter for me was the mid-90s, early 90s, 2000s. And that's when Dan, Keith, Rich, Stu, Kilborn, Berman, all those guys were rock stars in my world at that time. And that was appointment television. I don't have the same affinity for SportsCenter today that I did then. But when I do watch, the one that I seek out, Scott Van Pelt. It is a generational thing. The people, it's so fun. I'm sure you saw this. People who bitch, how the hell does Keith Olbermann lose to this guy?
Yeah.
I go, they're usually guys between 40 and 60. You don't see the 23-year-old go, how come Keith Olbermann got rocked in the first round? You know what they say? Well, good for him that he lost because we didn't like his political stance. And I go, I don't care about his political stance. It's about SportsCenter.
Right.
You know?
Right. Well, not only do they say that, but I think we saw a lot of people say after the UMBC over Virginia upset that was Matt Berry over KO, we saw a lot of people in that age range say, how is Matt Berry a 16 seed?
Yeah, of course. And listen, I earned a lot of respect for Matt Berry in this process. First of all, he's got great social following, but he himself is a genius on social media.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sure you saw the video that he put out on Saturday where he did his emergency press conference.
Right.
He's got Todd Grisham weighing in. Kevin Connors chimed in. I was like, that was expertly done. He rallied like Evan Cohen and Mike Babchick from the Morning Men, Lisa Ann, who does the fantasy show, The Adult Star. She was promoting Barry. I'm going, this thing is taking off. And kudos to Matt Berry for understanding, hey, listen, guys, it's a fun bit. We're going to milk this thing as much as we can. The fact that he's in the Final Four, of course, I don't think Matt Berry's one of the Final Four. Sorry, Matt. But I think Matt was probably the star of this tournament from a social media standpoint because he absolutely utilized it the right way. And here's the thing. If you weren't a fan of Matt's, you now have a newfound respect for him, and you probably if you didn't know him, you're going to seek out and go, who is this guy now?
Right.
If you were a fan, you like this guy even more right now. So kudos to him. I thought that was well done. I'll give you a few things that pleasantly surprised me. I was thrilled to see Kevin Connors get some due in the tournament. I've been a longtime fan, and I admit I'm biased.
Yeah.
The area where I reside and where I grew up, Kevin Connors used to be on Regional News Network, which was a channel that you only saw in the Hudson Valley.
Yeah.
And here's the interesting thing. He replaced Brian Kenny when Brian Kenny went to ESPN,
Oh, wow.
which is why the first round matchup of Brian Kenny and Kevin Connors for someone like me, guys like Freddie Coleman, we have a newfound appreciation for that because you're going, JB put together BK and KC in the first round, the RNN matchup.
Right.
Well, I knew Kevin Connors was great before Kevin Connors went to ESPN. And when you see how he's progressed over there, like when Mike Yam told Jack Ferris on video, he thought Kevin Connors is a first-class human being, but, incredible broadcaster. Absolutely true. Dead on. I mean, I want to know from your standpoint, which ones jumped out to you? What surprised you?
I mean, the biggest surprise to me is that Stuart Scott was not a runaway winner for this whole thing. And I know a lot of that has to do with generation because I think not only has he been gone for 5 years, 6 years now. I mean, it's been a minute. But also, I think people thought differently about him at the end of his SportsCenter run than we did at the beginning. I mean, like, forget cool as the other side of a pillow. Forget call him butter because he's on a roll. Like, it must be Sunday because I'm fixing to preach is my absolute favorite Stu Scottism of all time. And to me, like that, I know DP and Kenny, or I'm sorry, DP and Keith rather, started with the catchphrase stuff. But they didn't have their catchphrases printed on boxer shorts that were sold at ESPN zones all over the country the way Stuart Scott did. To me, he's the epitome of the art form.
Listen, I love Stu, and one of the coolest things I remember back before my career even really started, I was working at a small radio station that used to power off at night.
Yeah.
And I would go to Giants games and Jets games on Sunday on the press pass because I was trying to build relationships. And I remember the first time, I forget if it was a Giant game or a Jet game. I think it was a Giant game. I went down on the field before the game. I always went early that day because I thought, hey, I'll get to meet a few media people and, just build some contacts. And I remember Stu walking around the end zone, nobody around. And I just said, I got to meet this guy. This guy is unbelievable. I'd just love to pick his brain on something about the business, talk to him about his start and see if he has any advice. And he gave me a good 15 minutes down there. And we just chatted on the sideline, didn't know me from a hole in the wall. And I remember him at the end, he goes, look, if you got that kind of determination, you're going to get through this. And one day I'm sure we'll see each other. And I thought at the time, really nice guy, really appreciate it. But damn well he's probably said this to 30, 40 different people, and you're not going to cross paths with Stu.
Yeah.
And I remember I get to ESPN down the road, and I'm sitting there. I'm going 8 years later. I'm walking through the halls of Bristol, Connecticut. And I remember the first time I saw Stu, and I literally started to explain, hey, you and I chatted at a Giants game, and he literally at the end, and maybe it was just because it was built in his head, he goes, I told you if you kept doing that, one day we'd cross paths. And I'm going, what's the chances he really remembers this conversation? It didn't matter. It made my day. I was like, this guy, first of all, is a unbelievable talent on the air, but he was an unbelievable guy off the air. And that's, that's why, like, I loved what he did on the air. I hear where you're coming from because to me, he was just a special talent. Okay?
Yeah, living here in North Carolina, he went to UNC. He would take every opportunity to mention that, just like SVP does about Maryland, right? I worked with a bunch of people that were in his class at UNC that say the character on SportsCenter, that was the character in class when he was just trying to, be the class clown for a little bit. So, it's certainly, whether or not at that point it's a character or just part of your personality, he obviously stayed true to himself. And I think you've heard a lot of people say that over the years, right? No matter how people tried to change him to make him more palatable to a middle-aged white audience, he was going to be Stu.
No, and that's why he connected with the white audience by never trying to play to them. He tried to be himself, and that's what made him unique and great. I mean, look, when I worked at ESPN, I was fortunate that I spent 13 months working with Dan. That was during the time when Keith came back One of the reasons I went to ESPN when the opportunity was presented, I had a job offer the same exact day from WFAN. And that was the station that inspired me to get into the business. So I thought, I'm going to take WFAN. It's New York. I get to work there. And obviously the economics were a little different.
Sure.
The commute was a lot shorter in Bristol. And I just thought I had like two things that really moved me to want to get in the business. It was WFAN for radio, and it was The Big Show for TV.
Yeah.
I loved Dan and Keith. And so when I got there, I said, I'm going to produce Dan Patrick one day. And I remember when I got that call, how happy I was. And then they bring Oberman back to do an hour each day on the show. And I'm going, this is like unbelievable. I'm working with literally the people who molded me, that made me want to come here.
Yeah.
And you know, listen, I saw a different side of why they're very good, why, you know, when you're talent on that level, you have a certain expectation. You are going to be a hard ass at times because you've got so many people paying attention. It was a bumpy start, not going to lie. It was not a pleasant beginning. But in the end, man, I learned so much being around those guys. And, you know, I could sit back now going, I was glad I saw that side of it.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. But, man, you got to understand why. Like Dan Patrick as an anchor made everything look so easy. And you have all the chaos that's going on around him. You would never know it.
Another dude from that era that I thought would go further in this tournament was Charlie Steiner, who ends up losing the second round matchup to Susie Colbert. And it dawned on me a couple of things. Number one, I don't think, unless you are closer to 40 than 30, you remember what a great goofy uncle character Charlie Steiner was. If you know him, you only know him
the
from
Evander Holyfield, come get your whooping, Charlie. Come on.
So there's one Everybody Forgets where everybody is shadowboxing with him, and it ends with him punching the Syracuse Orange.
Of course.
but also that national anthem written by Francis Scott Off-Key. I mean, to me, Steiner is an all-timer.
Follow Me to Freedom. I mean, there were so many great, like, you know, one of the most underrated from that time. You remember when Carl Ravitch did the commercial with the young kid, and he's like being critical of Jimmy Key? I mean, there was so much great creative done at that point. And that's not to say they didn't continue it over the years, but because that was some of our early impressions of the show, you just can't help but hold them in higher regard, you know? And I don't know, man. I'm with you. I thought Charlie would go further, but hey, look, you can't, at least if you're going to go down, you're going down to Susie Colbert. Susie Colbert's great.
Oh, absolutely. And you know, so this is the other thing I'll say from a big picture standpoint. I'm surprised we didn't have more current anchors go further for the reason you're talking about they're on right now. Some of those folks are active on Twitter. You know, when we were putting the brackets together, I told you how highly I think of Carrie Champion and Elle Duncan. I guess I'm just surprised, and maybe it speaks to who's following us on Twitter, that there was no recency bias with this, or not a lot of recency bias.
You know, I think some of the feedback that comes in, you know, and I feel for anybody who's done SportsCenter in the last 8 years when this thing comes out, because it's almost like they get disregarded by the older folks. And I'm like, wait a second, you know, I get it. You don't have the affinity for the show that you used to have.
Yeah.
Well, you're different as a human being at 25 than you are at 45. Of course, your tastes are going to change. That doesn't mean Randy Scott, Nicole Briscoe, Matt Barry, Jade McCarthy weren't doing a great job.
Right. And to me, you know, just like the Francis Scott Off-Key thing, to me, unless you're a Stu, unless you're a DP, unless you're an SVP, to me, what is memorable are like iconic moments of SportsCenter. And Carrie Champion asking Big Boy from Outkast about his dog named Halle Berry, and his response is, "Oh, she's dead." That's one of my favorite moments from SportsCenter of the last 5 years.
You know what I want to do? I want to make sure we go through some of the staff brackets, because I think it's interesting just to see where we all put our picks ahead of time. I also, if someone's watching this video, whether it be through YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, I'd love if they haven't already sent in their brackets to do so.
Sure.
Twitter @SportsRadioPD. Send it to me. You know, this thing is done. We had a lot of fun with it, but it's always interesting to see where people put their feedback behind
Yeah.
things.
And by the way, we don't have Warren Buffett backing us, so you don't have to pretend you made a perfect bracket. Be honest with how you thought it was
Yeah,
going
I
to go.
mean, listen, I'm going to tell you, like, here's where I went on my bracket, and I'll go to the let's do the final 8, okay?
Okay.
In the Fuego region, I had Dan Patrick against Bob Lee. In the way downtown region, I had Keith Oberman against Chris Berman. Not hard. Those are 1 and 2 seeds. I think they're some of the most legendary figures. Out of those 2 regions, I had DP against Chris Berman for the right to go to the finals, and I had DP beating Berman to go to the finals.
Mm-hmm.
On the right side, in the Bad Beats region, my final 8 were Scott Van Pelt against Craig Kilborn, Stuart Scott against Rich Eisen. Now, Stu and Rich wound up being the matchup.
Yeah.
Kilby didn't get there. I had Kilborn actually beating Van Pelt, and I had Stu beating Eisen. I had Stewart beating Kilborn to go to the finals. My final was DP against Stu, and I put DP as the champ. But Stu was in the title game.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I had the same title game. I just flip-flopped it. I had Stu over DP. And again, this goes back to what I said about being surprised there was no recency bias. I did not count on Matt Berry rallying the troops for himself. I thought if any current anchor was going to make the Final Four, it was going to be L. Duncan. Maybe that means I didn't give Stu or didn't give SVP enough credit for being able to come out of the region that is literally named after him. I had DP over Steiner in one semifinal, Stu over L. Duncan in the other, with Stu over DP in the championship bracket. And you'll see on the screen that I made it easy for JB to read by putting everything in colors. When I picked Stu as the winner, I gave him the tip of the hat of doing it in Carolina blue.
For guys like our age, we're probably going to lean DP, KO, Stu. That's the that's the trio that you'll always think in a different light. But look, man, if you're 20 to like 35 right now, it's hard not to fall in love with what Scott Van Pelt puts on TV.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So as we wrap this up, do we have a sequel in mind for the NFL draft?
Oh, I don't know. We just did 3 weeks of this. Maybe we hit some version down the road for the NCAA tournament, or we come up with something else with the NFL draft. You know, one thing I did like with the NFL draft, and we did this with NBA too. If you look at, that's the one fun thing with our website, barrettsportsmedia.com. When we did the NFL draft last year, we've had talent pick program directors. We had program directors pick talent, right? And I put them on the clock, and hey, you could pick anybody in the country. If you could build a station, who are you picking, right? And when we did the NBA draft, we involved a lot of media reporters and columnists and writers to pick the 30 or whatever it was, 32. I can't remember the number, but best TV, sports television. What was it? Sports TV shows?
Sports television shows.
Yeah. And so, I mean, it's just looking for creative spins on it.
We've got a lot of guest columns going up at barrettsportsmedia.com right now. Jay Mariotti just wrote one that I think is a needed wake-up call for people that think we're all just going to snap out of this and go right back to the way things used to be. We've got a lot of sales-focused stuff going up right now. Even I did something that was content-related but was very much geared towards how you involve sponsors right now, because that's what everybody's thinking about in this world.
Well, look, I'm doing the same. I'm out of my comfort zone. I'm doing a new podcast, Managing the Crisis. Doing it almost daily. We also, one thing I'm really proud of, we've been working on this for a year, is we launched the BSM members directory. If you're a established or aspiring broadcaster, check it out. It's very affordable. I mean, I tell people it's less than a cup of coffee is $5. By the way, you can't go out and buy coffee, right?
Right.
So if you're not spending $15 a month at Starbucks, invest in your career. It's not, we purposely tried to make it really affordable. There's even an incentive if you signed up for the year, which will save you even more money. But the bottom line is, when this thing turns, and it will, you need to be out in front of people, because you're going to be entering a very crowded marketplace.
Well, that's what I said I said this on the last video. I truly believe when this is all over, there is going to be some version of a hiring boom in local talk radio. We can't tell you when it's coming. I mean, hell, even the director of the CDC can't tell you exactly when this thing is over. But right now, if you got nothing else going on, put yourself in the best position possible.
Well, look, and I don't want to, again, I'm not the type of guy, like I wrote the note on the site. listen, if you don't have the funds to do it right now, wait. Come down the road when you're ready.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. Putting your work in front of the right people is important. If you look at the Barrett Sports Media Summit that we do every year, why do you see 40 to 60, 70 executives and program directors in the room? Because they respect the brand. They trust me. They've gotten to know me over the years. They know that we promote the industry and care about the industry. Look, LinkedIn, YouTube, those are crowded places. I'm not telling you not to also put stuff there.
Yeah.
Do that. But having to email everybody every single day is hard. And believe me, when having done this, I've hired a lot of people. And I also talk to a lot of people about hiring people. When these things come up, I get a phone call. Hey, what do you know about this guy? I listened to these 2 clips. What do you think? Well, I have those conversations all the time. Help yourself. Put those clips in the right space. You know they're going to pay attention to the site. Put your stuff on display. I'm not telling you they're going to call you tomorrow, but if they think there's something there, they will in the future when needs arise. And right now, look, there's going to be a hiring freeze. Nobody's going to be in a rush to go and add bodies at this point. But
Right.
when this thing slows down and everybody is back in that space, you're going to be in a crowded marketplace, and you've got to do everything possible to stand out.